Hello, my friends. Tony Wright again, First Love Christian Church, or FLCC, and AB Wright Ministries. This is the 90-day Bible study. Once again, we're on day 23. We're in 2 Samuel, 12th chapter, 11th verse through the 22nd chapter and 18th verse. And oh my goodness. Yep, we left David doing a little self-reflection about his little trickery with Bathsheba and having Uriah killed so that Uriah wouldn't find out that somehow she was with child without him even being there. And God had let David know that he was going to pay for his disobedient and deceitful actions. But before we move on, though, there is one thing that I just want to make sure that we pointed out, right? And that is that David, he did some devious things, but he was quick to repent, and God forgave him time and time again. And for us, we need to remember that. You know, instead of wallowing in self-pity and denial, we need to take responsibility, repent of our wrongs, and God will forgive us. Now, that's just a quick add-on for somebody. But anyway, now David, he repented, and Nathan told him that God had put away his sin. In other words, God had already forgotten about it. And that David would not die because of his sin. But right away, David, he began to reap for his wrong. God struck that son that Bathsheba had birthed with an illness. And David, he went before God fasting and praying. And he tarried before God day and night. But still, after 7 days, the child died. Now the servants, they feared what might happen to David because David had been in such despair over the full course of that week. But once David knew the child was dead, he washed, anointed himself, changed his clothes, and when it came time to eat, he went and ate. Now the servants, they were just confused by this behavior. And they asked him, what's going on? I mean, he'd been so down, like he was out of it while the child was sick, and now the child is dead, and you seem like everything is fine. How is that? Well, David told him that the child is dead now. What good is any of the things that he had been doing going to be? And the child is already dead. So anyway, later, David and Bathsheba, they did have another son. They named Solomon. And the Lord loved this son. And the Lord called this son by the name of Jedediah. Well, now David already had some older children from his time in Hebron. Now David's oldest son was named Amnon. And Amnon loved his brother Absalom's sister Tamar. Now David was all of their father, but Amnon had a different mother. But anyway, Amnon, he was totally infatuated with Tamar to the point that this dude was physically sick. Well, he was physically and mentally sick. But anyway, his friend found out, what was wrong with him and told him to just lay in bed and act like he was sick. Then when David comes to check on him to see what's wrong, ask David to have Tamar bring him something to eat. And David did. He told Tamar to go to Amnon's house and fix him food to eat. So when she went over and when she had finished preparing the food and was serving the food to him, he asked her to go to bed with him, but she refused. So he forced himself on her. Then afterward, he got angry and sent her away and hated her. What? This dude right here is not quite right. But when Absalom saw his sister, he knew something was wrong. And when he found out what Amnon had done, he told her, disregard for your brother's sake. And she did. But when David heard what happened, he was furious. Now, Absalom, he never mentioned it to Amnon at all. Any at all. But he hated Amnon for what he had done to his sister Tamar. Then Absalom had sheep shearers in. And he wanted to invite David and all of his brothers to it. Now, David declined to go. But Absalom convinced him to let his other sons go. And they all did. Now, Absalom had told his servants that after Amnon had taken in a lot of drink, that Absalom would give them the command and they were to kill Amnon. Boy, I guess what we have right here is a case of a silent killer. But when they killed him, the other brothers got on their animals and they moved out. Well, the word quickly went back to David that Absalom had killed all of his sons. And then later, Jonadab told David that only Amnon had been killed. Wait, did you see that? Jonadab? Now this was David's nephew, but it's the same no-count rascal that gave Amnon that twisted scheme in the first place. Anyway, Absalom fled to Geshur to stay at his grandfather's place. This is his maternal grandfather, his mother's dad. And he stayed there for 3 years. Now Joab, he sensed that David still longed for his son Absalom, so he worked a plan to have David reach out to him. And yeah, the plan worked. So David sent Joab to Geshur to get Absalom. But King David told Joab to bring Absalom back and have Absalom return to his own home, but not to come by and see David. He was not to see the king's face. So for 2 years, Absalom was back in Jerusalem, but it still hadn't seen David. Absalom had sent for Joab, though, a number of times. Joab never responded. So Absalom had his servants go set Joab's barley field on fire. And buddy, that got his attention. Now Joab came by to see why they had set his field on fire. Yeah, right. He knew he was ignoring this dude. You know, like when you call somebody 4 or 5 times and nothing, then you run into them somewhere or something and the first thing out of their mouth is, I was just gonna call you. Yeah, right. Anyway, Absalom told Joab that he might as well stayed in Geshur if he wasn't going to be able to see David anyway. So Joab, he went to David, concerning Absalom singing, and David agreed to meet with him. They had a good meeting. Seemed like everything, seemed fine after they met. But after they met, Absalom began to work his way into the hearts of the people, doing a little trickery stuff, right? So he set up by the gates of Jerusalem as people came in to be judged on the matter. They say, he said, you from Israel? He said, yeah. And then he find out they're from the north, from Israel. He would tell them that, if he were made judge over those cities in Israel, that he would judge fairly and and he made sure that he was always extra gracious to them when they tried to bow to him. He would know he'd keep them from bowing and hug them and kiss them. So pretty soon he had a lot of people who were sympathetic to him, besides the fact he was young and handsome, compared to David, who is now older. But then he told David that he needed to go to Hebron to pay his vows, because he had promised he'd do that when he was in Geshur. And David blessed him to go. But Absalom had sent spies, an advance team ahead to that region, and had them tell the people that when they heard the trumpet sound, that they should cry out that Absalom rules in Hebron. So 200 men went from Jerusalem to Israel with Absalom. Now, they didn't know of his plan when they left, though. But Absalom also sent for David's counselor, Ahithophel. And Absalom quickly gained a large following there in Hebron. Now, a messenger went to David and told him that all the people in Israel are with Absalom. Uh-oh. So David gathered his household, got everybody together, and he prepared to flee because he knew just how treacherous this dude Absalom was. And David, he had some that were still loyal to him, Ittai and Hushai and Joab. But David, he was still distressed to have to leave Jerusalem. And you can tell his weeping and his head covering and him going barefoot. All those were signs of his mourning. Now, no doubt the betrayal of Absalom, though, weighed pretty heavily on him too, And then hearing that his trusted counselor, Ahithophel, had gone over to Absalom's side, none of this stuff was helpful, right? But the arrival of Hushai, as David reached the top of Mount of Olives, was an answer to his prayers, and it was a great encouragement to David. Now with Hushai and Zadok and Abiathar and Ahimaaz and Jonathan, all those in place, David was for the first time kind of feeling like, for the first time since he had heard that news, feeling like he could maybe weather this storm. You know, it's like that sometimes. You get bad news, it's devastating. But if you can just get away for a minute, get a little confirmation on the direction you're to go, and you'll get to a point where you feel like you can make it through. Boy, now, although many in the nation had turned against David, the fact that he did still have these faithful friends gave him just what he needed to keep going. So we can't underestimate the importance of having some loyal friends in a situation when you're really feeling betrayed. Ain't nothing like it, is it? Now, there was one dude, I know you saw it in the text, a dude named Shimei. He made it clear that he was delighted about David's downfall, didn't he? Boy, he better thank God that David was understanding. But the way David saw it, he said if his own son can turn against him, this man being against him was not such a big thing. It's all about perspective, isn't it? Okay, well, so here we have Israel, Absalom, and Judah ruled by David. And they were going to go to battle. So the actual battle, though, between Absalom forces and those of David is described in just a few quick verses here in this chapter. Absalom's army, though, was crushed by David's much smaller army. But they had trained troops and trained leaders. Leadership make a difference, doesn't it? They had 20,000 people that died. And a lot of those probably just got caught up in the hype and the appeal of, Absalom's presentation. He was just an appealing person. But perhaps for Absalom, his prideful confidence never caused him to consider defeat at all. He was probably shocked as anyone else about what he really brought on to this nation. But, well, at least we can say he had the image. But when it came time for the performance, they found out too late that Absalom was mostly show, and did you see what happened to him? This dude with his dainty self, his hair got caught in a tree limb while he was riding on a donkey through the forest trying to get away. But Joab, he made sure that they didn't have to deal with Absalom anymore, right? Because Joab knew that if they took Absalom back, that there was no way that David was going to bring himself to sentence this dude to death, no matter how much he deserved it, and no matter how much it was required by law. David wasn't going to be able to do it. So Joab just took him out. Now, but David was sitting there, he was back, and he was sitting there at the wall in Jerusalem, just constantly asking, anybody got news, and then calling up to the watchman to see if he saw anybody coming. Well, eventually, they saw two runners coming. Now, the first runner that came, he delivered news of the victory about Joab's forces defeating Absalom's forces. Then this Cushite came in with the devastating news that Absalom was dead. Now, across Israel, though, there was a widespread recognition that they needed to bring David back and make him, return things back to the normal as possible, make him rule over everything. Now, David, after the first agonies of his grief over Absalom kind of subsided a little bit, he regained his focus and his concern about leading this nation. But we have just a couple items we still need to clear up. Joab, he took care of both of them, though. There was Amasa, the dude became captain of the host for Absalom, that was so eager to go with Absalom. He was going to be a problem in the future, but not anymore. Fifth rib. Did you notice that everybody that needed to be put down got stabbed under the fifth rib? What in the world? What's with that? But Amasa, fifth rib. And then there was Sheba. And he tried to, take the people that Absalom had put together and continue that rebellion, because he said David was not going to be ruling over Israel. But Joab, he chased the dude down, and Sheba had held up in the walls of this city called Abel. Well, this woman talked to Joab, and she beheaded Sheba and threw the head down to Joab. Boy, that would not be the place you want to try to hang out right there with it. Hey, but you can hang out here. And while you are, you keep reading this word. And we're rolling toward the 30 days pretty soon. This is good stuff right here, is it not? And you just keep checking us out on your favorite social media platform. And oh yeah, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, FLCC, we're on the move, brothers and sisters. We're taking ministry back to the first love. We're going to see you again soon. Peace.